Hi, my name's Sam, and I'm going to be doing a whiskey review today. Um, Today, going to be looking at the Nikka Coffey Grain. Um, in the past, I've done Scotch reviews. This is Japanese whiskey. It is the first Japanese whiskey I've ever tried, and this is specifically the Nikka Coffey Grain. There's a coffee malt, and then this is the coffee grain. So even in the components, the makeup, it's quite a bit different from Scotch in general. Um, Not going to go too deep into the Nikka coffee, the Nikka or the coffee process itself, primarily because I'm not an expert in this stuff. What I know primarily is that the coffee is a type of still. It's sort of similar to a column still that's used. My understanding is like it's similar to the way that petroleum is distilled. So instead of having a single pot where all the alcohol or all the vaporized alcohol goes out and goes through a single aperture, it sounds like it's sort of in reflux. It sort of heats up and then cools down, and they take a certain segment of it. All that to say that the composition is a little different, and the nose, especially, as we'll see, is quite a bit different from something like Scotch whiskey. And then, of course, it's grain, so it's not barley. I think it's primarily corn and other grains. So in its composition, it's a bit closer to like a bourbon or other whiskeys. Got this bottle a couple months ago. You can see that this is, I've just finished it off now. Here in Minnesota, I think it was about I think it was $65 before tax. So not too expensive. Yeah, so I'll get into it. Last few things. 45%. And of course, the big thing, Japanese. So it's kind of interesting. I've never had a Japanese whiskey before. Here is the whiskey itself. Pretty light color, which makes me think that it's not chill filtered. Or rather that caramel's not added. And then also I would assume it's not chill filtered. I don't remember seeing anything on here to that effect. Let's see if it's on the front. No. Pretty nice. Nice looking light honey straw color. Poured this about maybe 10 minutes ago. But it's been in the bottle. I think I got this around in maybe October and November. So, I've noticed especially like towards the end of the bottle, the whiskeys all whiskeys that I've tried tend to mellow out quite a bit, especially when there's a lot of headspace in the bottle. I assume some of the alcohol's burned off, something else going on. On the nose, it's pretty interesting. A lot of the reviews that I've seen, I think of the coffee malt. There's a lot of really interesting tasting notes. Like I have Dave Broom's whiskey book, and he mentions things like suntan lotion, coconut. These really unusual, unique flavors that you don't really associate with a whiskey. I don't know if the grain is quite similar. There was a review where people mentioned that it smells sort of like glue. That might be the malt. It might be the grain as well. The grain, it's certainly interesting. It's certainly sort of complex. It's not terribly strong to me. It's not overpowering or unpleasant by any means. It's fairly nice. It's fairly light. It's not terribly sweet. Having said that, it's not terribly sour or salty or anything like that. Certainly not smoky or peaty at all. If anything, it's almost a little like starchy. But it's fairly light. Having said that, it's not super complex. It's unusual, but it's not like I'm not getting a lot going on. It's hard to pick out, any specific flavors. Of course, I've got some water here. From past experience, this doesn't need a whole lot of water to open it up. In fact, I feel like it drowns pretty quickly, but I'll add water maybe 2 or 3 times, just very small amounts to see if anything opens up. One thing, I mean, it's Japanese whiskey. No age statement. I'm not terribly worried about that. I haven't looked online. I've noticed in a lot of reviews, folks go into a lot of depth. They do a lot of research, and I think that's awesome. I think it's great to learn a lot about this stuff. I guess I've kind of decided that at least in my reviews, I'm not going to do that. I'll probably just like them to be quick and have it be focused on just tasting notes. Primarily because I just can't really memorize a lot of facts about distilleries. I'll give it a taste real quick. Really lovely. Pretty light. The very first thing that I notice is that it's incredibly refined. So even some of the better scotches that I've tried, which admittedly mostly 12 years, and I haven't tried anything incredible, but most of the whiskeys, most of the 10 and the 12 years that I try even after being diluted, they have a bit of a bite. They have a bit of bitterness, and this is so refined. I don't really know what it is, but there's no bite at all. It's incredibly smooth. It's really elegant, and it's just incredibly refined. It's glass after glass, even the very first glass, alcohol bite was almost non-existent, and the taste is, just drinking. It's incredibly drinkable. On the nose and the palate, very refined vanilla, almost like getting a whiff of pure vanilla. And it lingers too. I'd say middle of the road length, middle of the road finish, but it's impressive for something like this. I guess for a $65 bottle of whiskey, it's great finish. I've got some tasting notes here in my trusty little book. So vanilla, brandy, a bit of a rum or amaretto, and then almond paste. I'm not getting it right now, but in the past, gotten a lot of this almond paste, sort of marzipan, ground almonds, that sort of thing. No alcohol burn, no bitterness. It's pretty exquisite. And even though it's not terribly complex, it's not a one-note whiskey. There's, just being as refined and smooth as it is really pleasing and pretty excellent. So I'm just going to put in 2-3 drops here, just to see if anything happens. In the past, I've drowned it a couple times, so I'm trying to be pretty careful with that. Not much change on the nose that I can tell. I'll take a sip of water here just to sort of clean things out a bit. So really pretty much the same. Not a whole lot opening up or changing, but I mean, it's holding its own, certainly. Yeah, just sort of these waves of vanilla, a bit of baked goods. Um, One thing that I've noted, so if you, I was thinking back to the reviews I did of the Deanston. This Deanston's really had like this rich sort of cakey flavor, almost buttery, and not that it's a fault in the Nikka, but just contrasting them. I mean, the Deanston was pretty sweet, pretty straightforward. Vanilla brown sugar, and then this sort of rich cakey flavor. The Nikka, it doesn't have that richness to it. It's certainly a wonderful whiskey, but it's a bit maybe. Oh, thinner sounds bad, but it's just it lacks that quality, but it's not lacking in quality. Sounds like a really pretentious thing to say, but that's sort of how I feel about it. I'd like to try the coffee malt just to see, how they differ. And then, of course, I'd like to try, many more Japanese whiskeys in the past. That's really the primary thing that I heard about Japanese whiskeys in contrast to Scotch whiskeys is that they're more refined. And I mean, this is totally played out. It's it's very different. It's very interesting. It's really good. So yeah, definitely recommendation. See it as sort of like this seems like sort of a fall time whiskey to me. Just in that it's pretty mellow, pretty warm. Certainly very nice. So I got another bottle that I'm probably be reviewing pretty soon. Springbank 10. Maybe put up a review for that in just a couple days. Very different from this whiskey, and I have a lot to say about that one. So if you're interested in Springbank 10, definitely keep your eyes open. But this was the Nikka Coffey Grain. Wonderful Japanese whiskey. Reasonably priced, I think, as far as Japanese whiskeys go. Certainly worth picking up. Great, I mean, I don't drink whiskey every day, but you could consider it an everyday whiskey or a workhorse whiskey or just something you can pour without having to, sit and analyze it in depth. Absolutely refined, absolutely elegant, perfect, straightforward, no bite whiskey. Really wonderful. All right. Thanks for watching.